internet user searched for Nancy Guthrie's address and daughter's salary before Today host's mother vanished. This is literally breaking. Fox News is citing Google Trends. An internet user appears to have searched for Nancy Guthrie's home address in the weeks prior to her suspected abduction, Google Trends shows.
Something else that caught our attention from Fox Digital this afternoon. Google Trends show that an internet user appears to have searched for Nancy Guthrie's home address in the weeks prior to her disappearance. Once by someone in Arizona in June of 2025, and once again...
Someone Googled Nancy Guthrie's address. Then they Googled images of her home. Then they Googled her daughter's salary. Then they showed up at her door with a gun, a mask, and a backpack full of equipment purchased at Walmart. And they did all of that over a period of 10 months. Today we are going to lay out a timeline that changes everything about this case. Because what investigators initially treated as a possible burglary gone wrong now looks like something far more deliberate. The Pima County Sheriff used a word this week that he had not used before: targeted. He believes the person who entered Nancy Guthrie's home on the night of January 31st knew what they were after. And a trail of Google searches discovered by Fox News Digital, stretching back to March of 2025, that suggests that whoever took Nancy Guthrie did not stumble onto her house by accident. They studied it, they researched it, they planned it, and they connected it to the one detail that matters most in understanding why an 84-year-old woman living alone in the Arizona desert became a target: her daughter's money. This case is developing by the hour. Every forensic update, every investigative pivot, every new piece of evidence. We are tracking all of it and breaking down what it means, where it leads, and why it matters. The Google searches we are about to walk through paint a picture of premeditation that most people following this case have not seen yet. What do you make of it? Tell me below. Now, let's get into it. If Fox News Digital reported on February 18th that they had recreated Google Trends reports showing a pattern of searches related to Nancy Guthrie's home address originating from Arizona in the months before her disappearance, the timeline is specific, and it is chilling. The first recorded activity was a Google image search for Nancy Guthrie's address sometime between March 1st and March 8th, 2025. An image search, not a regular search. Whoever typed those words into a search bar was not looking for a phone number or a news article. They were looking for photographs, maps, satellite views. They wanted to see what the property looked like, where it sat, how it was laid out, what the approach would look like from the street. 3 months later, between June 21st and June 28th, 2025, the same address was searched again, and this time as a standard Google search originating from Arizona. Someone in Arizona was looking up the home address of an 84-year-old woman living alone in the Catalina foothills. In June, 7 months before she disappeared. Then 5 months of silence. No recorded activity. Nothing between late June and late November. But on November 30th or December 1st, the address was searched again. Another Google image search. Someone went back to look at the house a second time. Updated images. Maybe checking whether anything had changed since the spring. A new fence, a new camera, a new vehicle in the driveway. Whatever they were looking for, they were looking again. And then, between December 13th and December 20th, a new search appeared. This one was not for Nancy Guthrie's address. It was for Savannah Guthrie's salary, searched from Tucson. That is the search that connects everything. Because Nancy Guthrie's address is not famous. It is not indexed on celebrity real estate websites. It is not attached to any public figure in any obvious way. Nancy is a retired grandmother who has lived in the same house for decades. The only reason her address becomes relevant to anyone outside her immediate circle is because of who her daughter is. And searching for Savannah's salary in the same window as searching for Nancy's home means whoever was doing this research understood the connection. They were not just looking at a house. They were calculating what that house was worth to the family that could pay. 2 weeks after the salary search, on January 11th, 2026, Nancy's address was searched one final time, 20 days before she disappeared. And here is the detail that turns coincidence into something much harder to dismiss. January 11th is one of the specific dates that the Pima County Sheriff's Department asked neighbors to check their Ring camera footage for. On February 12th, a department captain posted on the Ring Neighbors app asking residents to review video from January 11th between 9 p.m. and midnight. They also asked for footage from January 31st, the night Nancy disappeared. Two independent sources pointing to the same date. Google Trends data showing a search for Nancy's address on January 11th. And law enforcement independently asking for surveillance footage from that same night. If the person who searched for the address on January 11th is the same person who showed up on her porch 20 days later, then January 11th was a reconnaissance visit. It is they drove to the house, they looked at it in person, they confirmed what they had already studied on a screen, and then they went home and waited. Now, there is an important caveat that needs to be stated clearly. Google issued a public response to Fox News Digital about this data. A spokesperson said that Google Trends is designed for understanding trends in large data sets. For topics with low or no searches, a Google Trends chart will often mix in random noise to protect people's privacy. That means a chart showing a spike for an uncommon topic is not definitive evidence that a search actually happened. That matters, and it is worth taking seriously. Google Trends data is not the same as a subpoena of someone's search history. It shows aggregate patterns, not individual users. It cannot tell you who made the search. Only that a search matching those terms appears to have been made from a general geographic area during a given time window. But here is why the pattern still matters even with that caveat. We are not talking about a single search that could be noise. We are talking about 5 separate data points across 10 months, all originating from Arizona, all related to the same address or the same family, escalating in specificity from images of the home to the daughter's salary to the address itself, and culminating 20 days before a masked man appeared on that very porch. Random noise does not produce a coherent planning cycle, and that is exactly what this looks like. A former intelligence operative who appeared on a panel discussing this case described the search pattern as a traditional attack planning cycle. Selection of the target, research on the target's location, revisitation of the site to check for changes, assessment of the target's financial value, and a final confirmation visit before execution. Every stage of that cycle is represented in the Google Trends data. The image searches in March and November correspond to the surveillance phase. The salary search in December corresponds to the financial assessment. The January 11th address search corresponds to the final confirmation. This is not how random burglars operate. This is how someone who has studied a target over months operates. And consider what the image searches specifically reveal about intent. A regular Google search for an address gives you a map pin, a street view, maybe a Zillow listing, but a Google image search gives you something different. Photographs of the property from multiple angles, all aerial views, real estate photos that may show the interior layout, media photos if the property has ever been featured in coverage, neighborhood context showing how far the house sits from its neighbors, how much vegetation provides cover, whether the driveway is visible from the street. Someone conducting Google image searches for Nancy Guthrie's address was not looking for directions. They were conducting visual reconnaissance from a screen. The 5-month gap between June and November also tells a story. In criminal planning, gaps do not mean inactivity. They mean the planner is either pursuing other preparation steps that do not leave a digital footprint, waiting for the right conditions, or dealing with something in their own life that delayed the operation. When the searches resume in late November with another image search and then accelerate through December and January, that acceleration pattern is consistent with someone who has moved from research into active preparation. The backpack purchased at Walmart, the holster, the mask, the clothing. All of that acquisition likely happened in the same window that the searches were intensifying. If the FBI has not already subpoenaed Google for the actual search records behind these trends, they almost certainly will. Because Google Trends shows patterns, but Google's internal logs show IP addresses, device identifiers, account information, timestamps precise to the second. The Trends data is the map. The subpoena data is the name. The Google searches do not exist in isolation. They landed in the middle of a week where the entire direction of this investigation shifted. Sheriff Chris Nanos told media outlets this week that he believes the person who entered Nancy Guthrie's home knew what they were after. He used the word targeted. That is a significant departure from the previous narrative. Earlier in the investigation, an inside source told a local reporter that investigators believed this was a burglary gone wrong. Multiple experts who reviewed the doorbell footage had independently reached the same conclusion. The equipment, the behavior, the apparent lack of planning, none of it looked like a premeditated kidnapping. But the sheriff is now pushing back on that framing. He is not saying it was necessarily a kidnapping for ransom in the traditional sense, but he is saying this was not random. The suspect went to that house for a reason. Nancy was selected. A retired FBI special agent who previously ran the Violent Crimes Task Force in Arizona offered a framework for understanding what targeted might mean in this context. It could mean a worker had been inside the home before, noticed valuables, or noticed that an elderly woman lived alone, and passed that information to someone else. It could mean someone identified Nancy through her connection to Savannah and calculated that the family had the resources to pay. It could mean someone with a perceived grievance, rational or not, fixated on that household for reasons that may not make sense to anyone but them. What all of those scenarios have in common is premeditation, and the Google search timeline supports every single one of them. Whether the motive was money, revenge, or something else entirely, the research started months before the crime. This was not impulsive. This was studied. The retired agent also made a point about the gun store canvas that deserves attention. He noted that the FBI agents who visited gun stores in the Tucson area brought photographs of people on their list. And a gun store owner who spoke publicly said that many of the individuals in those photographs had facial hair. That detail has not been widely discussed, but it is consistent with what is partially visible in the doorbell footage. If the suspect has facial hair, and investigators are showing photographs of people with facial hair to gun store owners, it means the physical profile is narrowing in ways the public has not been told. It is the same agent was asked whether he was surprised that the suspect has not been identified after nearly 3 weeks with 400 investigators on the case. His answer was blunt. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut sometimes. He said he has chased criminals he thought were extremely smart and then realized once he caught them that they had just been lucky for a period of time. The suspect on Nancy Guthrie's porch is not a criminal mastermind. He is someone who put just enough thought into disguising his appearance to buy himself time. But time is not the same as escape. The investigation is now running on multiple parallel tracks, and for the first time, those tracks are starting to converge. The DNA track produced results this week, though not the ones the public was hoping for. The DNA profile recovered from a black glove found approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home was submitted to CODIS on February 17th. No match. The unknown male who left his DNA inside that glove has never been arrested for a qualifying offense that would place his profile in the federal database. Separately, DNA found inside Nancy Guthrie's home also returned no CODIS match. It does not belong to Nancy. It does not belong to anyone in her family or anyone known to have been in her home recently. And critically, it does not match the DNA from the glove 2 miles away. Sheriff Nanos was direct about what happens next. He said investigators will now turn to genetic genealogy and the partial DNA from inside the home. He was explicit about his priorities. The home DNA is more critical to him than the glove found 2 miles away. And he said he has gloves 5 miles away, 10 miles away. You have to prioritize. The home is where the crime happened. Whatever DNA was left inside those walls may belong to the person responsible. The sheriff described the DNA situation at the home as complex. The samples are a mixture of multiple DNA profiles that have to be separated before they can be analyzed individually. The lab has to isolate each profile while preserving enough biological material for defense testing after an arrest. It is meticulous work. It cannot be rushed without compromising the prosecution. C.C. Moore, the chief genetic genealogist at Parabon Nanolabs and one of the most prominent figures in forensic genealogy, weighed in publicly this week, and her assessment was striking. She told NBC News she is extremely hopeful about the mixed DNA from the home. She said the fact that it is a mixture is actually more compelling, not less, because mixed DNA is common in violent crimes. And investigators have confirmed there was some type of altercation that caused Nancy to bleed. Blood was found on her front porch, Moore explained that the timeline for genetic genealogy depends almost entirely on the suspect's ancestry. If the person has deep roots in the United States and is of primarily European descent, they could be identified in minutes or hours. The databases are dense with those populations. But if the suspect has recent immigrant ancestry, particularly from Latin America, the process could take weeks, months, or even years, because those populations are underrepresented in the available databases. She pointed to the Kohberger case as an example. Brian Kohberger, who murdered 4 University of Idaho students, had recent Italian ancestry. That added weeks to the genealogy process. Moore also said something that reframes the entire lab rooting controversy. Earlier in the investigation, there was public criticism about the DNA from the glove being sent to a private lab in Florida, DNA Labs International, instead of going directly to the FBI. Moore said it was actually a good decision because that lab has the capability to create the SNP profile needed for genetic genealogy. The FBI does not have that capability in-house. They always have to send it to a third party. By routing it to DNA Labs International, investigators were able to run both the CODIS analysis and the genealogy preparation simultaneously, just as they did in the Kohberger case. What looked like a misstep was actually parallel processing. Moore told Fox News Digital she has full confidence that investigative genetic genealogy will identify the DNA contributor. She said it is just a matter of time until they discover who the DNA belongs to. She did not hedge. She did not qualify. She said it will happen. The genealogy process is already underway. The FBI confirmed that investigative genetic genealogy is being used on DNA from the glove and on other samples from inside the home. The FBI's specialized unit is building family trees from partial matches in public databases. Every match found is a branch. Every branch leads to more branches. Eventually, those branches narrow to a trunk, and the trunk leads to a specific individual. While the DNA and genealogy tracks run in parallel, the retail investigation continues to grind forward. Walmart has provided purchase records for every Ozark Trail hiker pack sold in recent weeks and months across Arizona and surrounding states. Investigators are cross-referencing those records against in-store surveillance footage at every Tucson area location. The sheriff confirmed this week that his team is working with Walmart managers across the entire state to trace every recent sale. They are looking at purchases going back 20 days, 30 days, 60 days. Every transaction with a traceable payment method is being run down. Every cash transaction is being matched against camera footage of the buyer. The holster, the clothing, and the ski mask are also being traced. The sheriff confirmed this week that investigators are looking into whether the mask was purchased at Walmart. And he made a point that has not been discussed enough. Think about the climate in Tucson. How many people are buying ski masks in the Tucson area? This is the desert. It does not snow. A ski mask purchase in Tucson in December or January is unusual enough to stand out in a transaction database. If the suspect bought that mask at Walmart, the purchase is sitting in a record somewhere, and it is far more conspicuous than a backpack that hikers buy every day. The gun store Canvas produced its own revelations this week. A gun store owner told Fox News that the FBI visited his store with a list of approximately 18 to 24 names accompanied by photographs. He said none of the names match purchases at his store. Yes, but the fact that the FBI arrived with that many names means those names were generated through other investigative channels. Walmart records, that NA comparisons, cell phone tower data, tips from the public. The list exists because the evidence is converging. The sheriff denied this week that investigators have narrowed the suspect pool to approximately 40 people, calling that claim not true. But the gun store owner's account and the specificity of the FBI's approach tell a different story. You do not walk into gun stores with 24 photographs unless you have a working list of persons of interest. The public denial and the operational reality may not be the same thing. There is also new information about technology being deployed that has not received enough attention. The sheriff confirmed this week that Meta and Apple have reached out to assist the investigation. He did not specify what kind of assistance they are providing, but both companies control vast ecosystems of user data. Apple controls iCloud, iMessage, location services, and device telemetry for hundreds of millions of iPhones. Meta controls Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and the metadata associated with billions of interactions. If the suspect used any product from either company at any point before, during, or after the crime, those companies may have data that investigators can use. The sheriff also confirmed that investigators are working with the manufacturer of Nancy's pacemaker to see if they can help track where it went. Nancy's pacemaker app disconnected from her iPhone at 2:28 a.m. on February 1st. That was the last electronic signal associated with her. If the pacemaker manufacturer has additional telemetry data, server logs, or connection records that were not stored on the phone itself, that data could reveal information about Nancy's location or condition in the hours after she was taken. Parsons Corporation, the company that deployed its Bluefly Bluetooth detection technology to the search, issued a public statement this week confirming its involvement. Bluefly has been used on helicopters, ground vehicles, and on foot across the desert terrain surrounding Nancy's home. The system scans for electronic signals and creates a heat map of detected devices. But the fact that no pacemaker signal has been detected means one of three things. Nancy is not in the areas that have been searched. The pacemaker is no longer transmitting. Or there is a physical barrier preventing detection. The sheriff addressed that directly this week. He did not say the pacemaker search has failed. He said it is ongoing. And separately, a prototype drone-mounted detection device built specifically for this case by a cybersecurity expert remains in the FBI's possession and may still be deployed. Amid all of this, the sheriff also revealed something about the very beginning of the investigation that raises its own questions. On the day Nancy was reported missing, February 1st, a neighbor called Adult Protective Services. APS sent an investigator to Nancy's home. The sheriff confirmed this publicly, but did not elaborate on what prompted the call or what the APS investigator found. Why did that neighbor call APS? What did they observe? Was it something specific they noticed that morning? An open door, an unusual sound, a light that had been on all night? Or was it a longer-standing concern about Nancy's welfare that happened to coincide with the day she was reported missing? Investigators have not disclosed the details, but the timing suggests that neighbor may have information about Nancy's condition or surroundings in the hours before her disappearance that has not been made public. And there is one more detail from the early investigation that the sheriff addressed this week. He acknowledged that in hindsight, he would not have turned over the crime scene as quickly as his department did. The scene was released to the family relatively early in the investigation. Whether that decision cost investigators evidence is unknown. The sheriff was honest about it. He said it would not have changed the outcome, probably. But he admitted the scene should have been held longer. That kind of candor is rare from a lead investigator in an active case. It also suggests the sheriff is aware that every procedural decision in this investigation is being scrutinized at the highest levels. Because this case is now operating at the highest levels. President Trump told the New York Post in a phone interview this week that those responsible for Nancy Guthrie's disappearance will face the most severe federal penalties if she is not returned alive. When asked directly whether that meant the death penalty, Trump responded, "The most, yeah, that's true. Under federal law, kidnapping resulting in death carries potential maximum penalties, including the death penalty. Arizona state law also authorizes capital punishment for specific crimes." The president's statement is not just political commentary. It is a direct communication to whoever is holding Nancy, or whoever knows what happened to her. If that person is monitoring news coverage, and investigators almost certainly assume they are, the calculus just changed. The consequences escalated from a state prosecution to a federal death penalty case. A Milwaukee attorney named Michael Huppy announced this week that he is offering a separate $100,000 reward through Crime Stoppers for information in this case. His reward is in addition to the FBI's existing $100,000 reward. The total is now $200,000. Huppy said he believes the Crime Stoppers model is more likely to generate tips because it allows complete anonymity. The FBI's tip process requires personal information, which Huppy believes may discourage people from coming forward. The sheriff issued the most direct public plea to the suspect this week that we have heard from any official in this investigation. He said, "Just let her go. It will work out better for you in the long run. Take her to a park. Take her to the hospital. Just let her go." He was asked whether the investigation has transitioned from a rescue operation to a recovery mission. His answer was one of the most striking statements made in this entire case. They asked me, "Do I have proof of life?" I asked them, "Is there proof of death?" He said 400 people woke up that morning and went into the field with the hope and belief that they are going to find Nancy and she is going to be okay. He called the suspect a monster. He said investigators will find him. And he said he will begin to worry when the tips start to slow down, because when tips dry up, cases go cold, and the tips are not slowing down. Tens of thousands continue to pour in. Two officials briefed on the case also confirmed this week that there is no evidence Nancy was taken across the U.S.-Mexico border. Authorities on both sides of the border have been sharing information since the start of the investigation. Multiple sources in local law enforcement said the disappearance shows no signs of cartel involvement. The way the suspect approached in the surveillance video does not match any known pattern of organized cross-border crime. There is also a detail about timing that has been discussed online, but deserves proper analysis. Savannah Guthrie was scheduled to fly to Milan to co-host NBC's coverage of the 2026 Winter Olympics the week her mother was taken. That assignment had been announced publicly weeks in advance. Anyone paying attention to Savannah's career, anyone who had already searched for her salary and her mother's address, would have known that Nancy's most famous family member was about to be on the other side of the world. Whether that timing was coincidental or calculated is unknown. But in an investigation where the Google search data already suggests months of research into the family, the Olympics scheduling adds another data point to the pattern. The sheriff also confirmed this week that investigators still have not recovered video from Nancy's other cameras. She had additional Google Nest cameras beyond the doorbell, but she did not have an active subscription. Without a subscription, Nest cameras do not store cloud footage. The sheriff said they are working with Google to try to retrieve anything that might exist in the system, but he was not optimistic. "We don't think we can get anything, but we'll try." That means the doorbell footage that the FBI recovered from the back end may be the only visual record of that night. Everything else that happened, from the moment the suspect moved past the front door to the moment he left with Nancy, exists only inside the house and inside the evidence investigators have not made public. The retired FBI agent who spoke publicly this week made a point about the investigation's morale that deserves attention. He said agents were hopeful when the surveillance images were released. They expected a watershed moment, meant a quick identification and arrest. When that did not happen, and when detentions and search warrants produced dry holes, the reality of a long investigation set in. He described it as a slog, thousands of tips, most leading nowhere. Agents covering 100, 200 leads that do not produce results. Human nature sets in. The momentum has to be maintained by leadership. He said he sees no signs of the investigation unraveling, but acknowledged that this is the hardest phase, the phase where stamina matters more than breakthroughs. And that is where this case sits right now. Day 19, 400 investigators, 50,000 tips, a DNA profile being fed into genealogy databases that have solved cases as old as 40 years. A retail trail connecting a Walmart-exclusive backpack to purchase records being cross-referenced against surveillance footage at every store in the region. A gun store canvas that produced a working list of names. Tech companies offering their data. A pacemaker search scanning the desert. A $100,000 federal reward and a separate $100,000 through Crime Stoppers. And now, a trail of Google searches showing that someone in Arizona spent 10 months researching Nancy Guthrie's address, studying images of her home, and looking up how much her daughter earns. 20 days before, a masked man appeared on her porch with a gun. The sheriff is no longer calling this a burglary gone wrong. He is calling it targeted, and the evidence is starting to explain why. But there is a question at the center of all of this that no one has answered yet. If this was planned for months, if someone spent nearly a year researching the target, studying the property, calculating the family's wealth, why was the execution so amateur? Why buy everything at Walmart? Why use a revolver holster for a semi-automatic? Why spend 41 minutes inside the house? Why fail to account for the doorbell camera's back-end recording system? One possibility is that the person who did the research is not the same person who showed up on the porch. The planner and the executor may be two different people, The person Googling Nancy's address from their couch in Tucson may have sent someone else to do the job, someone less capable, someone who made the mistakes we see in the footage because they were operating on instructions, not instinct. That would explain the disconnect between the sophistication of the planning and the amateurism of the execution. It would also be consistent with the two different DNA profiles found at two different locations. And it would be consistent with the TMZ tipster who referred to the main individual. Language that implies a hierarchy implies others. Another possibility is that one person did everything, but the months of research gave them a false sense of confidence. They thought knowing the address and the layout was enough. They thought a mask and gloves would be enough. They did not understand the difference between planning a crime in theory and executing it under pressure at 2 a.m. with an 84-year-old woman who was not supposed to be awake. Either way, the Google searches changed the narrative. This is no longer a story about a random burglar who stumbled into a situation he could not handle. This is a story about someone who picked a target, studied that target for months, and then acted. The question is no longer what happened. It is who planned it, who executed it, and whether they are the same person. The sheriff said this week that investigators have asked for all of the Guthrie family's phones, computers, cars, and houses. They have processed them. They have talked to every family member at length. Every single one has been cleared. Not a single person in the family is a suspect. The sheriff told the media to knock it off. He said people are hurting, they are victims, and they have been cleared from the first few days of the investigation. What the family has gone through in these 19 days is something most people cannot comprehend. Their phones, their computers, their homes searched. Their names dragged through online speculation by people who have never met them. Their grief compounded by accusations from strangers. And through all of it, they have cooperated fully and continued to plead publicly for their mother's return. Savannah Guthrie posted another video this week. She said it is never too late to do the right thing. She said her family still has hope. She said they believe in the essential goodness of every human being. That message was aimed directly at the psychology of whoever is holding Nancy. If the person responsible is someone who got in over their head, someone who has spent 19 days trying to figure out what to do next. Savannah's message offers a path, not a good path, but a path that does not require another irreversible decision. The sheriff echoed that message with his own. Just let her go. Take her to a park. Take her to the hospital. It will work out better for you in the long run. Somewhere, someone knows who did this. Someone saw the Google searches on a shared computer. Someone noticed a new backpack, a new holster, a new ski mask that had no reason to exist in the Tucson heat. Someone heard a conversation they were not supposed to hear. Someone noticed a change in behavior around January 31st that they have been trying not to think about for 19 days. The DNA is being built into a family tree right now. The Walmart records are being matched against camera footage right now. The IP addresses behind those Google searches can be subpoenaed right now. And the genealogy process that identified the Golden State Killer after 40 years, that caught Brian Koberger after 6 weeks, that solved a 24-year-old cold case in Maryland when a water bottle thrown away at an airport matched DNA from under a victim's fingernails. That process is running right now in a lab where people are working around the clock to give Nancy Guthrie's family an answer. It is not a question of if, it is a question of when. And for an 84-year-old woman who has been without her medication for 19 days, when is everything? If you have information about this case, call the FBI tip line at 1-800-CALL-FBI. Call the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-3514-900 or submit a tip online at tips.fbi.gov. There is a combined $200,000 in reward money for information leading to Nancy's location or the arrest and conviction of anyone involved. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 19 days. She has a pacemaker. She needs her medication. 400 people woke up this morning and went out into the Arizona desert to find her. And somewhere in a database, in a family tree, in a transaction record, in a Google search log, the answer is waiting. This story is not over.